Welcome to KSOK Uncensored. Tonight's guest is Brett Simpson. Brett is running for Clark County Auditor, Clark County, Washington. Brett, I recently heard you talk about the three most important roles in a county is 1, sheriff, 2, the DA, and 3, the auditor. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, I think that the sheriff is obvious, right? They're our last line of defense. They're our only elected officials that are enforcing the laws or should be enforcing the laws and protecting us and protecting our rights. So the sheriff's kind of an obvious one. The DA has become more obvious as of late since we know that a bunch of DAs are refusing to prosecute. And what good is arresting people if they're just going to turn them back out on the street? But I think the one that's kind of flown on the radar is the auditors. For us, it's auditors. For a lot of states, they're called clerks. And it's kind of a less interesting sounding position, a less interesting thing,
Not
but
as
really
sexy,
they're the
maybe.
ones. No, exactly. But they're the ones that are protecting our vote. They're the ones that are protecting and making sure that our vote counts and that we are in fact electing the people into the positions of power over us, that we're granting power to do our business for the government. So to me, it's the most important because if you don't have that one under control and you can't trust it, then every other spot becomes suspect too. So
Exactly. And actually, I was doing my historical research on county auditors, and this is going back to the 1800s when really county politics and county politicians were formed. They quickly realized, I believe it was less than a decade before they realized that you need an auditor for checks and balances. And so we
mhm.
understand most things that happen are because something failed somewhere. So it is an incredibly important role. Talking about the sheriff, in Clark County, Washington, just recently, gosh, days ago, something unfolded, and I'll let you, go off on this too. But they took the county jail out of the sheriff's jurisdiction, even though the two folks running for sheriff, who are going to be in this general election here on November 8th, they opposed this move, but it was voted through. Can you talk to me about your thoughts and opinion on what the heck happened?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that the jail is uh, should be under the purview of an elected official, right? We should have as close accountability to it as possible because there's such a need for accountability, right? If people are being arrested and they're being denied their rights or they're being withheld in the jail, then we need to have direct access through an elected official, a directly elected official, to make sure that the jail's being run right, that it's humane, that they're taking care of people okay, that there aren't violations. And I think that we've seen that there's been a constant decline of the King County jail. I'm sorry, the Clark County jail, and
Probably
we've
King
seen it
too.
for years. And well, I'm sure that it's not much better up there. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that it's an amazing thing because basically my understanding is that they're taking it away out of the jurisdiction because of the hazards that it poses, that it hasn't been run right, that it's understaffed and all these things. But these are all self-imposed things that have happened over the last several years, whether it was COVID and cutting staff and cutting capacity. The facility itself is incredibly degraded and much too far out of date, but it hasn't been properly either kept up or there hadn't been proper plans to put in a new one. So it's kind of bizarre that they're taking over, saying it's been mismanaged, but it's been mismanaged because it hasn't received proper funding. Is a big part of that, and it's the same council voting to take it away that also would give it the funding that it would need to function properly.
Right, right. And I find it quite suspect, the timing on everything, because we are 50 days out from the general election, and 2 of the 5 council persons, because we have, male and female on that are running, are going to be changing out. And so one of them is, Senator Don Benton, who I am working for as campaign manager, but, he's going to win. Let's be honest here. But anyways, I find the timing very suspect. And so we have these 50 days, right, until the general election where we're going to get a new sheriff and some new council persons. And here we go. We're going to just slide this right through, even though the 2 sheriffs who are running, the two people running for sheriff, neither of them agree with this move, and one of them is going to be the sheriff. So it's just incredibly
Yes.
suspect,
And,
and
and the
just
fact that
and
they
very
didn't give any sort of build-up period. There's no public comment really. I mean, yeah, you had it
right,
at a public meeting; they could give public comment, but there wasn't a lot of notice. There was some process to it. It was throw it on the agenda, pass it through,
right.
and what's the point? I would say, to me, it seems so suspect that I would say mark this as 2 years from now or however many years from now it's going to be. They're going to say, oh, we need to privatize the prison. Is what it's going to be the
Right.
next step, right? The first step is to remove it
Yes.
from the control of an elected official, put it under the administrative bureaucracy. And then the second step is we're going to privatize it.
Right. And for people that don't understand that, you can make so much profit off of prisons and jails. And what comes when you're trying to make a profit, you're going to cut corners, and go low grade and go cheap, right, to have the ultimate overhead. So wow, really, really concerning. Let's break down the DA piece of that, because as you know, my husband is a Portland police officer, so I know a lot about what happens with Mike Schmidt, the
Mm-hmm.
worst DA out there, who is in Portland. And what he's doing is he's not prosecuting crime, and that's why, as you talk about, the DA, the sheriffs and the deputies and the police officers, they can arrest people all day long, but unless the DA and the DA's office, and again, the DA is very important, the speed of the leader, the speed of the pack. So that DA's office,
Yep.
if they're not prosecuting crime, the police officers and these sheriff's deputies, they're thinking, what's the point? Why am I literally putting my life on the line to arrest somebody? Because every time you go to slap
Yeah.
cuffs on someone, you put your life on the line. You arrest them for what? For them to be thrown out in 24 hours and not even, and have their charges dropped?
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly kind of what they've done, right? They've undermined the law and order system. It's creating chaos, of course. It's creating an unsafe environment for all of us to try and live in. And it's forcing all these officers to make a choice. Obviously they had a commitment to the community. Maybe they have families growing up here, but now they got to look at it and say, well, what's the risk to me? What's the risk to my family? I could end up in prison because of some of the laws that restrict me from using force or, being reasonable and trying to deal with people who are unreasonable. And they're picking up and they're going to different states. And they're going to other jurisdictions that are outside of the purview of what Washington State, has done in law. So they're not getting the backup that they do deserve. And that doesn't mean that they don't also need accountability. But there's simple steps to accountability that haven't been done in Clark County. And I can't understand why. Body cameras still aren't. The sheriffs don't use body cameras. I don't understand why. Any long-term studies shown that not only does it save a ton of money in false prosecutorial costs against false charges against the officers, but that objectively the data shows people behave better when they know they're on camera approaching an officer. So it actually makes the officers' jobs easier. And they try and say, oh, it costs too much, the data retention, the public records requests, there's a whole storing data is not that expensive anymore. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You don't even have to do it in-house. They can do it all on web, cloud servers. And
Right.
the savings in prosecution fees or in fighting false charges, use of force charges, more than offsets that cost. So it would be a cost savings. It would be life saving in some instances, and it would provide accountability in both directions. And why they haven't instituted it is beyond me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's a deterrent. It is absolutely a deterrent. When somebody knows they're on camera, it's like, why do people within their private residences and their businesses, they have something that says, you're on camera, smile, you're on camera. And that is a deterrent. It's proven. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, it is mind-boggling that has not been something that is already put in place. Really discouraging. I want to move on to the auditor role, obviously. That's what you're running for.
Yeah.
I want to talk about
Exactly.
the fact that you're not a politician. You never wanted to be the quintessential politician. You are a husband, a father, and you have felt, and this is based on my research on you, you have been called to run. You feel like at this point there is no other choice but to do something about this disaster that you're watching unfold. Dive into that for us.
Yeah, you could say called. That's one way, and the other way is pushed. So 2 years ago, after the election, the data wasn't making sense at a very high level. It didn't follow trends, it didn't follow patterns. So that's when my curiosity kind of peaked. And well before that, I mean, when I was 18, 2003, sending off your mail-in ballot was always kind of a fill it in. And as you're putting it in either the mail or the drop box, I tried to always use the drop box. You're kind of going, I hope this is a real thing. You're filling out a ballot and you're just hoping, I hope it gets there. I hope it doesn't get lost. I hope it actually gets counted. I hope it gets counted the right way. I mean, our system is so set up to be opaque and to keep the public at arm's length so that we can actually view what's going on and assure ourselves that it's being done properly. And I think I'll get into this a little bit later, but they've really designed the system that way, that the fraud protections and the transparency has been purposefully stripped out over the last 20 to 25 years in Washington State, and other states have had similar things. Usually when there's coordination between states, you kind of know that there's some bigger agenda going on. So I started working with election integrity people here. And in fact, early on in the process, we hooked up with a national person who came in and gave a speech showing data that basically proves we have a problem. It's just statistical data and statistical fact. And so I had gotten about 55, small business owners and people around Clark County that had means and got them together so they could see this presentation. We said, we need to raise funds. We need people to commit. We're going to go to the auditor. We're going to show them this problem. We need to figure out what happens so that in the next election, we have a chance to clean this up and make sure that the next election works right. But we know that an audit takes money. We know that they have budgets. And when we go and say, hey, we need to do something that costs, $150,000, we don't just get shot down because of a funding issue. And so people committed to that. They said, yes, we're happy to put in money. We need to solve this. And we need to, it's the most important thing to make sure that we're staying in a free constitutional republic. And so we went and we presented the evidence and we said, we have all the money. We don't know what went on. Obviously something went wrong. We just want to find out what the problems are, and we want to work with you to make them better and try and fix them so we can figure out what's broken in this process. And of course, we got a big old no right away. And so we tried a bunch of different things. We tried suing. We filed lawsuits based on canvassing results where we had found that people had voted that don't exist or never existed, the addresses. It might be, we had a house where a nice old couple lived there for 30 years. They built the house. They didn't have any kids, but there were 8 people that voted from our house. So,
oh wow, lovely.
So we presented some of these results as evidence. That's one example. So we presented these results saying, see, there's a problem here. We're not alleging anything in particular other than we want to do an audit because we want to understand where things have gone wrong and what's wrong.
Right.
Within 24 hours of filing that lawsuit, Perkins Coie and the DNC, they flew in and said, we want to be adjoined to the lawsuit. And their reason and their motion for the amendment is that our clients have vested interest. And if they're allowed to perform an audit, then our clients will be irreparably harmed. And so to me, it's going, I'm not a lawyer. I deal with a lot of legal contracts and things, but I'm not a lawyer. To me, I'm going, is it normal to sound like you're admitting that if we do this, they're going to find a problem? I mean, that seems insane to me that you would just admit that right off the bat. Apparently, it's somewhat normal to make a pleading like that, and it's not an admission of anything. But they tied us up in federal court. They kicked us around. They used COVID as an excuse for not doing anything. There's motions and pleadings back and forth during the period of time, and they're constantly trying to dismiss it. They pulled us up to federal court, which didn't make any sense. We filed in Superior Court, so that means Washington State Court, because we were asking for remedies in Washington State that only the state can give. So the feds wouldn't be able to give us that remedy. And then they finally drug it out long enough that Biden had appointed a judge to our district. And so then they gave her that case. And then it sat there basically. And now that since she got the case, the defendants have put in a motion saying, well, they can't give us, they can't get the remedy they're asking for through the federal court anyway. So this should be dismissed. To which we said, we know they can't. That's why we wanted it in Superior Court. That's why we had it there before. If you're going to do anything, you should remand it back to the Superior Court. But we're talking 18 months later. Obviously, nobody expects
These
the
people are
courts to
such
be quick.
losers. Big
They are,
losers.
yeah,
Oh
they
my
are,
goodness. Wait, so
and
when
and,
did you start
and they're
this
back.
lawsuit?
This was filed in 8 different counties in Washington State, and it was, um, it was about 18 months ago. I'm losing track. When
That's
you start when you
crazy.
start campaigning,
Yeah,
and I'm doing it on top of everything else,
your brain is
everything blends
mush. Yes,
together.
I can
Yeah.
only imagine. And you're everywhere too. You're doing awesome. But wow, 18 months. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you, but it's just mind-boggling. They're just trying to kill it, basically.
Yeah, or just drag it out in perpetuity, right?
Mhm.
This is typical of the bureaucracy. So what I do real estate development, as that's what my career is. Um, and you'll get the same thing in the bureaucracy, in the administrative part of things is they might ask or demand you do something that you're not legally required to do, and it's unreasonable. But they use time and money against you. They know that they have all the time and that you're bleeding money and time the whole time, the entire period that's happening. And they use that as a weapon against you to try and force you into
Yes, they
compliance
do.
or force you to do things that they'd like you to do, but you're not legally required to do. So
Wow.
it's a pretty typical tactic of the government. When you have to fight them with your money, it's not lost on me that I'm also fighting them they're fighting me back with my own money.
Right, right. Seriously, seriously. People don't realize. I'm like, everything government, just say tax dollars instead, right? That's been,
Yep.
and I'll go off on this little tangent for a second here, but this is something I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
train people to think differently. So, like when it's it's free from the government or whatever. I'm like, no, those are your tax dollars funding that program.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
anytime somebody says something like that or government funded program, no, it's taxpayer funded. So it's a shift in thought process, but it's important that people take that shift because we are
Yeah,
funding all of this nonsense, and it's absolutely a disgusting use of tax dollars. Wow, wow. So okay, so you were
and
pushed.
that's a good point. And well, I was going to say you have a very good point about the word choice. They use word choice against us, right? They use bumper slogans that are overreaching. Most people want to be a little nuanced because they understand everything's not completely black and white. But they use those word choices against us. Like, what was the example you just gave? You said, well,
Government
it's their money, right?
funded,
No, it's taxpayer money. Yeah,
right,
government funded or whatever else. And it's like, no, it's taxpayer
right,
funded. So even when we want a victory for somebody, we're like, yeah, they should sue the government. The government, screwed them over. Well, the problem is, in the long run, that's all of our money. Yeah, I want that person to
right,
be made whole,
right,
but it's all taxpayer money. So they're not even playing with their own funds. That's kind of the big problem.
right.
They
There's
they
this
they've
person I
got they.
follow. I was going to there's this person I follow on Instagram, and he goes around, and this is right when, the free college was going around, and he
Mhm.
was saying, hey, will you sign this for free college? And people, yeah, 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 that's awesome. So they sign it, and then he goes, all right, and then mark on there how much of your paycheck you're willing to donate. And they're like, whoa, 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 and he's like, that's exactly what it is. And so people were having aha moments. The light bulb didn't turn on there, but it really puts it into perspective when people do that type of stuff on the ground. So I love watching that, but it's coming from the top. They know what they're doing, but we have to
Mhm.
slowly wake up all of these voters. And Brett, talk about why it's so important that you are voted in for Clark County Auditor versus the incumbent who's been in office, 25 years?
Yeah, he's been in there 24 years. So he ran against somebody when he got in. I believe he ran against somebody the second time, but he hasn't had anybody challenge him since then. So it's been about 20 years since he ran a
Wow.
campaign.
He's
Um,
brushing the dust off with you.
so there's a number of different reasons. The easiest answer is it's transparency, right? We've been through it. We've been asking questions. We've been trying to get clear answers. In my opinion, what's become evident is that even if he means well on everything, even if there's nothing malicious on it, and what he's doing, the equipment and software and networking and everything that they utilize down there is beyond his skill set. Um, he doesn't understand electronics and well enough. He doesn't understand software well enough. He doesn't understand networking and vulnerabilities to internet connection and everything else well enough. They rely basically exclusively on the third-party vendor, who's the machine manufacturer, in order to do everything that's anything technical on it. So there's no real oversight onto what this company is doing, because nobody there has the skill set to understand it. And anybody who does, we've approached with people who are plenty capable and competent and certified in, every sort of networking software programming language. They're not allowed to look at it, right? They call it, it's proprietary. Convenient. You can't look at that code. Well, how can it be proprietary when the entire point of it is to count whether a bubble is filled in or not? I mean, they've been doing that with Scantron since the 70s, late 60s. I mean, this wasn't a hard thing. They used to do it electromechanically. Yeah. And they used to do it electromechanically. You didn't even need software, right? It was all hardware. So there's a lot of, I'd say, gray room that's been created around the processes that are down there. The other reason that I think is a problem is that there's so many laws going back since 1996 is when they put in the Motor Voter Act, and that was kind of the kickoff, in my opinion, of what I call the institutionalized problems. But 2002 was the HAVA Act. Can you break down
what the Motor Voter Act is?
Yeah, the Motor Voter Act was essentially just, we're going to sign up everyone at the DMV. I mean, that's a overly general way of saying what it is, but that's really what it was. Is instead of people having to go down to the auditor's office to register to be a voter and present ID and prove you're a citizen, or we're just going to do it through the DMV. And they've really expanded it over the years. It's basically anytime you touch a government agency, you're kind of being prompted or automatically enrolled into it. In fact, the DMV had a big problem in 2018. They got sued because they were pre-checking a box that when you go to the DMV, right, illegal aliens can get a driver's license. There's a box there that you check that says, I attest under penalty of perjury that I'm a U.S. citizen, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And so you check the box, but the problem is they were pre-checking the box. It was basically out of view on the form. And then the big thing that got them in this lawsuit was that they had overtly told the Department of Licensing employees not to bring it up and not to point it out to people. So they essentially were signing up a bunch of illegals to vote because the illegals didn't know any better. They didn't know what that box was. So that's kind of the beginning of it. The HAVA Act was the feds coming in and saying, hey, individual counties, you can't really keep your voter rolls anymore. It's too many voter rolls. We had like 3,100 voter rolls across the country because each county kept their own. So they kind of centralized it to the state level. And, to some degree, centralization might make sense for efficiency in some cases, but it's like anything else. It's a double-edged sword. You're creating a tool that can be misused. And that's really what we've seen in the centralization of our voter rolls at the state level, is that it's been used against us. It's been used as a tool for nefarious reasons because we've lost control of that, and we being the people and the voters.
Right.
So all these laws that have gone into place, 100% mail-in voting, everything else, they all happened under the current incumbent, the current auditor. And you might say, well, he's not passing laws. He's not. Okay, I get that. And, legislature's done it, the legislature, whatever the Secretary of State's doing, he's got to kind of follow. But the fact is, I've never seen him raise a red flag.
As a leader, if you can't inspect what you expect, you cannot lead. And it sounds like that's a huge problem. He cannot inspect. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing as far as the machines are concerned. He's just crossing his fingers, hoping everything is going as it should be.
Just following what their instructions are. Yeah, it's just do A, result to B, print C, right? But to me, the biggest problem as a leader is you don't have to be necessarily the expert in everything, but you got to have people who are, that you can trust.
Right.
And also, you have to raise a red flag, right? Where was he coming to the constituents? Where was he coming to the counselors? Where was he coming to the reps and stuff in our county, the reps and state senators, saying, don't pass these laws. They're going to make it impossible for me to assure that our elections are safe and secure. Don't pass this. Don't let them do that. I never saw anything that was outspoken. I've gone back and tried to find anything. I never saw anything that was red wave flag and say, waving the red flag and saying, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be doing this. So
Right.
at that point, you can't claim victim status again. Oh, the state made me do it. The Secretary of State made me do it. You've
Right.
predated. You've been in office since before all this stuff happened, really. And you said nothing about it through the whole period of time.
Right. Right.
That to me is the
Yeah.
biggest problem. How can you trust that then?
Right, exactly. Well, I want to touch on there's the Heritage Foundation. They launched like a voter integrity scorecard, and I believe they launched it in December of 21. And though not all aspects of this are a perfect idyllic scorecard, like you mentioned, there's one system that really they gave a little credit to, probably shouldn't have. But that said, Washington ranked 45 out of 51. And just to really hit home the trend here, so we have Washington at 45. We have New Jersey tied at 45. We have Vermont, and then we go Oregon, where I'm at. Oregon, California, Nevada, and Hawaii ranked dead last with this integrity scorecard. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not surprising. The West Coast specifically, it's been like a game of one-upsmanship, and we saw that during the shutdowns too, right? They got this weird game where they like who's the bigger establishment shill, I guess, right? And we're gonna run out and strip out all the fraud protections, and they always do it with the sale of convenience, comfort. Not disenfranchising people. Now, of course, they've gone really rogue and they like to break out things like the racist card, right? Or it's racist, it's transphobic, it's whatever. You're disenfranchising people. It's all excuses, right? It's all. Once you see and understand the pattern that they've created over these laws over the year, with the way things have gone and the narratives that they've put out there, you realize that it's all pretty carefully planned. Couple decades long process that they've dug us into. And now the final cap, what I call the nail in the coffin that they're trying to push on us, is that ranked choice vote. And I'll circle back to that, but what I want to talk about, the Heritage Foundation.
We have 30 seconds. Drive us home with ranked choice voting. Why we should reject this.
You should reject it because it completely gives them cover for any sort of fraudulent activity. It makes it almost impossible to pull the data apart and figure out what was wrong and whether it followed any trends. We saw the disaster that happened in Alaska with their race. The person who got the most votes didn't win. It doesn't make any sense, and it dilutes and creates a game out of it. And then it's a good place for them to hide fraudulent stuff. So.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. When I'm doorbelling, I'm making sure to bring that up to voters, because the government and these folks like to sneak things through, and we're not going to let them do that. So I want to just say something. I heard in one of your recent interviews, Juan's telling us we have a little bit longer that we can have, which is very generous of him. In one of your recent interviews, you talk a bit about, there's a quote from Plato, and I wrote it down because I'm not really good at memorizing these things, but I love it because it's really resonating with me. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And is that not true, or what?
Yes. And again, I think it's on purpose, right? They drove the idea that politics is ugly, and it is, but you shouldn't want to be involved. Only gross people want to be in politics. Stay away from it, try and avoid it, do all these things. But then the problem is it doesn't go away. Now we've just conceded and left it to all those ugly people, and those people willing to put up with the ugly or involve themselves in it. So what we really need is a bunch of good people to come in and, stand up to it and make it a less ugly thing to deal with, make it a more transparent thing to deal with, and give the people back their voice and their power.
Yes, I love that. And I just want to ask you a question. I know that, again, I got a lot of information from watching a recent podcast that you did with Slavic Vote, which is a great interview. I want to talk to you about, do you feel that your faith has something to do with your run for auditor?
Yes. I don't know how to describe it other than we tried to get anyone else to run for it. I felt like God was saying you have to do it, and I tried everything I could not to do it. And so got down to the wire, and it was like, well, if nobody else is going to do it, then I'm going to do it because it needs to be done, right? It's not something I'd like to do. It's not something I want to pause my life to do, but it's something that absolutely needs to happen. And so I'm willing to do it. I'll go in and we'll figure out what's going wrong. And I'll just be able to be transparent. Doesn't mean I can fix everything, right? Some of it's law, some of it's state law. That takes the legislature. Some of it's at the Secretary of State level. The Secretary of State would need to fix some of that. But the least I can do is go in and try and provide transparency as to what's gone on and what's going to happen, and raise those red flags and inform the public.
Right.
This is what's happening in our elections, and here's what we need to do to fix it.
Right. I think that's fantastic. And I know you're friends with Mike Terry, and something I heard him say is, when our kids, our grandkids, they're learning about these times that we're living in right now, and they ask you, what did you do? We cannot just say, well, I sat back and watched, right? And so that really stuck with me, because it's true. It's putting on this armor every day, and I know you are, it's at a different level for you because you're actually running for public office, but putting on the armor every day to be a truth teller, to be an open Christian conservative in these times. I mean, we just saw somebody in North Dakota. He's an open conservative, and he was ran over by somebody merely for his conservative values, and let out, I believe, on a bail, let out on a pretty low bail, actually, for vehicular homicide. So anyways, a lot of things wrong with that, but I just think it's amazing that you are being selfless. I always say this, people that are running for public office for the right reasons, right, like you are, they're very selfless individuals, because it is work. You probably do on the weekends at least, like three events every Saturday, plus things throughout the week, and that's on top of your day job. So, and being a husband and a father. So major hat off to you, and just have a lot of respect for you and what you're doing. I've heard you speak at a number of events. Speaking of, I want to say, I have just 30 seconds here. The incumbent didn't show up to your debate. You were going to have the chance to have a debate, and he no-showed. And this goes back to, I know it's a nonpartisan role, but let's just put this out there. He was endorsed by the Democrat Party, right? And so I truly feel like I see a lot of feet up on the desk coming from the left, and a lot of Democrats, they don't show up for debates. I don't see them out with the community. I don't see them doorbelling. I don't see any of the work.
There's a good reason why. We had a candidate forum at a golf club, a retirement community golf club, and he showed up to that, and I watched 12 old retired people eviscerate him for 20 minutes. I mean, that's why they don't show up, is because the public's not on their side.
Good point. Good point. Yep, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate everything you're doing. Where can people find you?
Go to my website, simpson4auditor.com, SIMPSON, the number 4, auditor.com. I post all the information. I post all the data. I post news articles from around the country, as well as what's happening here locally. So it's a good centered area to get information on election integrity.
Yes, you have a great website. I was going to say that, by the way. I really like your website. It's well put together. So fantastic. All right, you guys, that was Brett Simpson, amazing patriot here in the Northwest. Go to his page. If you can donate, if you don't live in the area and you can't get boots on ground, donate. I mean, these running for office is not cheap, especially when you're not with the establishment. So donate and look them up and show them your support. Thank you so much for coming on. And for everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. And I will see you next Thursday on KSOK Uncensored.
Well, hey guys,